Hey everyone, I hope you guys had a great holiday. With that said, I have some creepy horror stories regarding couples for you guys to listen to. And if you guys do like it, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy. Trying online dating around the holidays is the worst. Everyone's so busy with family stuff that you can never tell if a guy is really into you or was just lonely over the long weekend. But when Tim asked me out the week before Christmas, I figured, why not? Give it a shot. His Facebook profile seemed normal enough. He likes hockey, he works in accounting, has a sea beagle. I'll admit, I was hoping my pre-Christmas date might lead to some holiday romance. You always see those cheesy movie cutscenes of new couples, ice skating, hand in hand, or sharing a mug of hot chocolate after a horse carriage ride. Heck, even a walk around the Christmas market, admiring the lights would have sufficed. But nope, Tim wanted to meet at France's Bistro, some smoozy French restaurant I couldn't afford to even walk past, let alone dine in. I hesitated, suggesting maybe something more casual for our first meetup, but he insisted this place was perfect. Guess he really wanted to impress me from the start. I crossed my fingers that he wouldn't expect me to split the bill later. Things we mortals do for a chance at love. I arrived at the restaurant feeling super jittery and self-conscious. I couldn't remember the last time I got this nervous for a first date. I kept compulsively checking my hair and makeup in the reflection of the auric gold-framed windows as I waited to be seated. Finally, Tim showed up, although I almost didn't recognize him from those boyish Facebook pictures. He looked well, kind of odd and uncomfortable. Actually, no charming smile. No sorry I'm late, no wow you look beautiful, greetings whatsoever. Off to a very awkward start. Dimitri led us back to a tiny table crammed into a dark corner beside the kitchen. So much for romance. With the terrible seating, Tim asked awkwardly. He fumbled to pull up my chair. I noticed he wasn't even nicely dressed for such an elegant restaurant on Christmas. Baggy old jeans, worn-out sneakers, and ill-fitting sports coat over an ugly Christmas sweater. Even his scraggly hair and 5B drugstore cologne reeked of laziness. My dating hopes started sinking as we sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence. Everything about him seemed heavy. The board waiter finally took our order after Tim chased him down, passing by, noticed other diners giving concerned side glances toward our corner. They probably paid the poor girl stuck on nightmare first shift during the holidays. Tim spent more time grumbling to the waiter than actually talking to me. So much for Christmas cheer. Throughout the long drawn-out dinner, I tried asking Tim the standard small talk questions. Where are you from? What do you like to do for fun? Any holiday plans? But he gave the shortest possible mumbles in response, hardly making eye contact as he messily gobbled down his expensive meal. It was like pulling teeth trying to get basic controversial reactions from this random dude. By the time our plates were being cleared, the awkward silence between me and Scrooge, like Tim, was unbearable. I kept hinting that he would be some sort of pleasant holiday discussion in exchange for this colossal waste of an evening, but he ignored every attempt to lighten the mood with some Christmas banter. The longer we sat there, not connecting whatsoever, the more I know his creepy mannerisms about Tim that made my skin crawl, beads of sweat dripping down his jawline despite the cold weather, daily yellow fingernails nervously tapping on the table that he refused to even trim for tonight, strange body tics whenever waiters walked by. I tried not to imagine what kind of weirdo would invite an unexpected when you're in a false pretense. The restaurant suddenly felt sinister, as if something sinister was afoot in this dark corner, and nobody would notice. If this freak would lash over my small talk, just then the waiter reappeared with a checking hand, and my heart dropped realizing what that meant. With zero charm or personality exhibited all night from this emotionless lump, was he really going to stick me with this bill? Now I nervously stammered something about maybe splitting it, since we both ordered food, but creepy Tim just sat there, swaying, with not even so much as a Christmas gift suggestion, or a New Year's drink invite to smooth talk his way out of the expense. He burdened me with nope, Dead silence and blank stares. After an eternity, he grunted that his wallet was in his car, then asked me to pay with a presumption that he'd pay me back, as if he could better fund this nightmare solo and pray for Vimo reimbursement from Buffalo Bill over here. I was truly panicked for my safety at this point. With no cash for a sneak escape, I was about to head to the little girl's room, and Bill, rather than be forced to front this bill under pressure from Norman Bates, I awkwardly started gathering my things when our waiter suddenly returned, insisting drinks were on the house tonight. Thank you, sweet baby Jesus, as he smoothly handed Tim the check folder again, with a wink. I realized the savior bartender must have sensed disaster unfolding in the dark corner and intervened before it got worse. He graciously told us to have a wonderful Christmas, as we hurriedly exited, leading intent to reluctantly pay solo after all. I got the heck out of there as fast as possible without looking back. No more online dating for me anytime soon. That's for sure. I just barely escaped before that creep could pull anything sinister, after luring me into a little dark corner on false pretenses. But thanks to a holiday miracle, at least I'm safe at home now, cozy, and in watching cheesy Christmas rom-coms. That almost makes me forget all about that deranged Mr. Deeds. In fact, there's a peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and by my lesson learned, if something feels off about something, abort mission. So happy I can avoid that creeper now, and just enjoy the rest of this holiday. From the safety of my own living room, chestnuts roasting on the fire, Jack Frost definitely still nipping at my nose, but no more creepy online dates getting their claws into me tonight. God bless everyone. I cannot believe I've ever agreed to a date with creepy Carl from work. I mean, he seemed nice enough, chatting around the office, curing machine, always asking how my weekend was, and joking about our clueless boss. But things took kind of a weird turn when Carl started making comments about my body and asking intrusive questions about the past relationships. Still, after months of friendly back and forth small talk, and in bed trying to grab me some dinner sometime, I finally just accepted the date invitation to shut him up. Surely one meal couldn't hurt, right? I was wrong. I was so wrong. I knew it was a nightmare the second I got into Carl's car, and I felt fuzzy leopard print seat covers and air fresheners that reek of stale Marlboro birch. Then Carl kept steering the conversation toward gross topics, like what's your hottest body part and how wild were you in college? Barf. I desperately tried to change topics, but creepy Carl kept leering at me and steering things back towards you know what. By the time we got seated at Rocco's Italian kitchen, I already had one foot out the door, ready to fake an emergency phone call. But since I was starving, I figured some decent pasta might salvage part of this gross evening. Plus, Rocco's usually had pretty loud music on weeknights, so at least Carl couldn't grill me with invasive questions if we had to shout over top 40 cover Soul and Right ROM again. We got stuck at a tiny two-person table, right next to two speakers, blasting the band at max volume, so Carl kept leaning his greasy face closer and closer to hear me better. His hot booze breath made me want to puke up my linguine. I was basically trapped, shouting back basic one-word responses to Carl's delusional idea for our future plans as a couple. We weren't even through half of this horrendous first date, and he's picking out baby names. Help by the time our plates were cleared. I knew I had to escape this disaster before Carl started shopping or asking what I wanted for our 5th anniversary. But every time I faked I was tired and should head home early, creepy Carl made excuses why I should stick around, have more drinks, more talking, him and his cousin who owns a restaurant, blah blah. It was painfully clear that Carl was trying to get me drunk enough to take advantage of me. In no way. In a stroke of genius, I made up that my elderly neighbor's dog usually gets walked at 9 p.m, which should really relieve the poor dog, who's probably crossing his little legs by now. Yes, it seemed to work. Carl asked the waiter for our check, while I plotted my greatest game. I figured we'd sell up, and I would immediately call an Uber while Carl wasn't looking, home free, but instead Carl insisted on paying, even grabbing the checkbook away, when I politely offered to split it. Then he said of course drive me home and walk me into my door afterwards. No, no, no. Now I was trapped again, having accepted a free meal from this lunatic weirdo. How could I get out of the inevitable? We were in the parking lot and Carl was drunkenly fumbling to unlock his car. As I frantically texted my besties, Mayday, messaged my friend Kara immediately, called me back pretending to be my poor, hungry, bladder explosion risk dog, so I have an excuse to rush home alone. Crisis averted. I've made my friend have a big show of loudly answering the fake neighbor call, until Carl's something urgent came up with the hound, so no ride necessary. I'll take an Uber instead. Except, creepy Carl still wouldn't detach himself from my side. As I opened up the Uber app, Carl invited himself to just swing by my place for a minute. On the way, since his apartment wasn't far. Absolutely not, bro. You were not getting my address after stalking me all night. Luckily, my Uber arrived in 60 seconds, and I basically dove into the back seat like a getaway driver was rescuing me from a bank robbery. I made sure Carl wouldn't wait down the Uber and hop in behind me as we jetted off into the night. Thank God, away from the creepy Carl at last. When I got home, I immediately blocked his number and email, like deleting traces of a crime scene. I may have to actually quit my job to avoid that sexual harassment waiting to happen by the copying machine. What a freaking predator. So much for testing the waters with Office Carl. I should have trusted my gut when I first heard slurping sounds from his cubicle. No amount of free Alfredo is worth sitting through creepy Carl's delusions. They were destined to be together. Next, no more settles for this girl from now on. I choose my own dates. Far away from that slime ball. Maybe I'll just foster a few dozen shelter dogs this year. Instead, now those are the kind of boys who will give me unconditional love, without expecting anything sleazy in return. Yep, curl up with the golden retriever sounds way better than another round with Carl. Good day everyone. I decided to go ahead and make this account to type the story out and get sucked into the rabbit hole that is this app. I don't know if I actually avoided something sinister for a fact, but I'd rather play it all safe and say that I did. I'm 29 years old, and while I'm well traveled and I've been around quite a bit, I do occasionally make some pretty rookie mistakes. My fault, and I make no excuses. I try to remain diligent and alert, but I'm very capable of letting my guard down. So after being here in the US for about 2 months, I decided that I was bored, sitting around my unit watching 90 Day Fiancé. So I decided to make the old dating profiles again. I made no specific intentions known about what I was interested in accomplishing, as I don't really know myself. I just wanted someone to hang out with and see where it goes naturally. I ended up matching with this one bloke who had shared interests with me. We chatted a bit over the app, and eventually I found it okay to give him my number. After talking back and forth for a couple of weeks, I agreed to a meetup. We met at a pub and had a couple of drinks. I'll admit at first I didn't recognize him because he didn't resemble his photos to the extent that I was expecting. He didn't look bad by any means, but I could tell that he used older photos and edited them enough to where he seemed more appealing. I swear, I'm not trying to sound superficial, because he was cute, just not what I was expecting, but I also think we've hit a point in social media culture where it's safe to assume that we won't see the same thing in real life as we do online, and that's okay. We did hit it off, we discussed the usual first date stuff, then we got into more detail. I told him about back home and work, and how life was different there than here in the States. At one point we were talking and holding hands. I felt comfortable enough to let him kiss me. Well, he asked me as we were leaving if I wanted to go back to his place for a cup of coffee. I told him I knew what coffee really meant, and I didn't want to do that on the first date. He assured me it'd be 1 cup of coffee and that he would give me a lift home, so that I didn't have to call an Uber. I accepted this offer, and we walked back to his apartment, which was a few blocks away. As we were going upstairs, he made a few questionable remarks. He mentioned how I wasn't like most girls because I accepted his invitation, and it alluded that, you never know, I could be a psychopath. He then motioned with his eyes down to my dress, and inquired about my titty size. I told him again that I was sorry, but the night would not end with him getting lucky. As we got into his unit, he dismissed himself to the toilet, and left me sitting on the bed. It was a studio, and he didn't have a couch. As I was sitting there waiting for him to finish doing whatever he was actually doing, I noticed in the corner by his bed that he had 2 masks. One was a cartoon-looking goat mask, and another was a cat, or maybe a tiger. What was more alarming was that he also had a Bowie knife, and small box cutters. only a short distance away from them. Upon further observation, I also noticed there was a black jumper draped over a dresser. Then on his bedside table, there were a pair of latex gloves. Yawns. Okay, I don't much feel like being murdered tonight. I got up and calmly left the unit. Then I made a haste down the stairs and down the street, where I was able to catch a lift. Now look, I may have just really hurt his feelings because he had no malicious intent, but if that's all that happened, then I prefer that over the possible alternative. All of these items alone wouldn't have been that bad, but all of these random items within a short walk from each other, I'd rather just not have taken the chance. I do feel bad for leaving a person, but I don't feel bad about leaving what could have potentially been a dangerous situation. That, along with his random personality change, was enough for me to make that call that I made. As of recently, I noticed that he either blocked me from Tinder or deleted the app. Thanks for having a read. I hope this weekend finds you all well. It's hot, so please drink heaps of water. Stay safe and lots of love. We've all had bad dates, right? This is the only date I've had that rang every alarm bell and waved every red flag. I preface this by saying I don't go on many dates. When I do, I make sure I follow safety protocol by only meeting my date in public places. Let either family or friends know where I'm going and park in a populated place, close by wherever we meet. Anyway, this date initially suggested we meet at his house to watch a movie and have a few drinks. And I said no, I don't feel comfortable with that, and I only want to meet in a public space. He seemed okay with this, but then brought it up a few more times, and I said if money is an issue, we could meet up another time, or forget about it altogether. But my date backtracked and went with my idea of meeting at a cafe. I chose that because I was familiar with and inquisitive to where we both lived. Anyway, he turns up in a two-door car, the detail is relevant, and goes into the cafe, and I follow behind and introduce myself. After a polite introduction, things begin to get weird. I order a Coke and he says, "Don't you want a drink?" I was going to pop into bar, which is connected to the cafe, and get one. I say no, I'm not drinking, and he looks at me like, what the fuck, as if I'm being unreasonable. I already explained in messages I don't drink, as I'm on medication, so having to re-explain it again pisses me off. He seems disappointed and goes to order a cider from the bar, while I get a table. Anyway, we sit down with our drinks, and date immediately goes on about going back to his place again, even though the original plan was to stay here and order food, and I already stated that was not happening. He says something along the lines of having a few drinks and eating at his place, and I said we don't have to eat, we could just have our drinks and leave. He gets defensive and says he has money, but first if he would go back to his. I make a joke and say, "You're not a killer, are you?" And instead of laughing it off, he stares at me uncannily and says, "You don't think I would hurt you, do you?" I laugh uncomfortably and says of course not. But really, I'm relieved this date won't go any farther. The date suddenly says, "Are you going to follow me in your car?" Because that would have made sense. How about we go in my car? But I got packages in the front, so you have to squeeze in the back, and I'll drop you off to your car after. In reality, that made less sense than me following in my own car, and then driving home from his after. The fact it was completely illogical made it even more creepy in my mind. Every alarm bell was going off at this point. I said, "Look, I don't want to go to yours, and your insistence is giving me the creeps." The date looked shocked, mumbles something about needing the toilet, and excuses himself from the table. A few minutes later, I see him through the cafe window getting into his car and driving off. Massive bullet dodged in my opinion. Also, the fact his car didn't have any back doors made it even more sinister, because imagine if something happened in the car and I couldn't escape. So later, Creepy Date kept wanting me to go back to his house, and when I kept saying no, he finally noped out like the creepy is. I reported him on the dating app. I hope you all enjoyed those stories. I love hearing back from you guys in the comments, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. With that said, stay depressed.